Hello and welcome to today's PIR live event webinar brought to you by Partners in Research Canada. My name is Stacey Joyce and I will be your host. If you're joining us live, please remember to send in your questions via the chat button in the top left corner of your screen. You can send those in anytime. We'll queue them up for after the presentation portion of our webinar. And make sure that when you send in those questions, you're letting us know where they're coming from. That could be a student's name, the school name, teacher's name, what city you're in, any of that information, and we would love to give you a shout out when we ask your question. So today's guest is Katherine Wright. She is the Adopt-A-Pond Coordinator in the Conservation, Education and Wildlife Department at the Toronto Zoo. Thank you so much for joining us today, Katherine. I will let you take it away.
Hi, Stacey. Thanks for having me. It's nice to be here. Let me just share my presentation with everyone. I think you should all be able to see that now. So as Stacey said, my name is Katherine and I work for the Adopt-A-Pond Wetland Conservation Program at Toronto Zoo. So our program has been around for 26 years. And our mission is to provide you with the tools and resources that you need to create, restore, protect, and conserve wetlands and the life that lives within them, which is biodiversity. So today I'm going to talk to you about wetlands and the reptiles and amphibians that live within it, because that's what we focus on. I'll tell you a bit more about what Adopt-A-Pond does and ways that you can help these animals. So wetlands are important for a number of reasons. For one, they filter our water, and that's because they act like a sponge, so they can absorb pollution that's in the water and make it safe for us to drink. Also, as a sponge, they can absorb water itself. So in times of heavy rain, they can control flooding, which is great for habitats, but also for humans. They are a home for many animals, fish, mammals, reptiles, amphibians, birds, and invertebrates, and they're a great spot for people to enjoy. So you've probably been in a wetland yourself, you've gone kayaking or fishing or canoeing. They're just a really nice spot to take a walk in and learn. So sadly, wetlands are being destroyed at a very fast rate. Over 70% of wetlands in Ontario have disappeared, and that's because they've been drained, dredged, and dumped in for farming and development. And this has then resulted in poor water quality, increased flooding, and habitat loss, because we've lost those wetlands and we just discussed those ways that they're so important. So reptiles and amphibians are two groups of animals that live in wetlands, and I'm just going to talk a bit about the differences between them. And there's some pictures on the screen to show you the differences. So amphibians include animals like frogs, toads, salamanders, and newts. Reptiles include turtles, snakes, lizards, and crocodiles. So amphibians, they have a moist skin and they breathe through that skin, and that's because they live more in the water. Reptiles, on the other hand, they have more of a thick, scaly skin and they breathe using their lungs. And they're more land species usually. Now amphibians, because they live mostly in the water, they lay clusters of soft eggs, and their babies usually live in the water, and then they grow up and transition and move on land as adults. So if you think about frogs, how they go from an egg to a tadpole and then to a frog. Whereas reptiles, they lay individual hard-shelled eggs, and their babies pretty much look like miniature versions of their adults. So reptiles and amphibians are important for several reasons. For one, they are both a predator and a prey species in the wetland or a forest ecosystem. So as a predator, they eat other animals lower in the food chain. So for example, insects. And a lot of humans consider insects to be pests, so they're another reason they're great for humans. They too are food for animals higher up on the food chain. So they have that great role in the food web and the whole ecosystem. Now they're also important for scientists, because scientists consider these guys to indicate environmental decline. And that's because they're very sensitive to changes in the environment. So if we watch what's going on with amphibians and reptiles, that might indicate what could happen to some other animals and we can do something about it. So let's talk about frogs and toads first. So these guys belong to the same group, but there are differences. So if you look at this frog up here, if you can see my mouse moving, so on the right top corner, that's a frog. And frogs live more in the water, whereas toads, like this one on the left side, live more on land. So frogs in the water, their bodies are very streamlined. So they want to be able to swim very well. Their eyes sit more on top of their head so they can poke out of the water. And they've got those nice long legs so that they can swim and jump. And jumping is a good way to get away from a predator. Toads, on the other hand, their bodies are more fat and stocky. Their eyes are lower down on their bodies and they have shorter legs. So they don't hop as much as frogs do. Instead, they have those warts on their body, which is their predator defense. So those warts contain a fluid, which is toxic to a predator. But don't worry, if you're touching a toad, you're not going to get warts on your hand or anything. That's just a myth. They just want to save themselves from being eaten. So Ontario has 11 species of frog and 2 species of toad, and they all have their own sounds. So I'm going to show you one of them, and hopefully the sound's working. So that was the American toad. Its call is kind of like a high-pitched trill. Let's hear another one. So that is the leopard frog. And its call is more of a chuckling sound or like wet hands rubbing a balloon. So you can learn what these different calls sound like, and that's a way that you can tell what frogs and toads are in the wetland. And you might not be able to see them, but you can hear them and you know what species they are. Okay, let's talk about snakes. I hope no one jumped back in their chair a little bit. Some people are afraid of snakes. And snakes, unfortunately, do have a really bad reputation, but the promise they're not that bad. So snakes, you can see, these are some of the species in Ontario, and we have 18 species. They come in all different shapes, sizes, and colors, but there's only one species that is venomous, and that's the Massasauga rattlesnake. Now, I'm in Toronto, and this snake lives a little bit further north, more in cottage country, and it has venom because that's how it kills its food. And it eats smaller animals like mice. So the amount of venom it has is built for a small animal, whereas humans are much larger. So we're not going to be as affected by this species should we be bitten. But if you are bitten, it's still important to go to a hospital within 24 hours. But this snake, it doesn't want to bite you unless it's scared or being poked at. So it has that rattle to just warn you, I'm here, please don't step on me. So if you see a snake, just, step back, give it some space and let it be. It really just wants to be left alone, and they are more scared of you than you are of them. It's also, if you're in the area, really good to know what different species look like. The rattlesnake gets confused with these other species, the milk snake and the fox snake, because it does look kind of similar. And the fox snake, for example, has kind of a fake rattle that it does because it's a really good adaptation to scare predators away. Okay, let's move on to turtles. So Ontario has 8 species of turtles, and 7 of them are considered to be species at risk. So this means that they're endangered or threatened or a special concern, and basically they're in trouble. Now, turtles really aren't that different from people in terms of, body. So you can see the spine here on this picture of a human and the ribs and the pelvis, and we have a space between the ribs and the pelvis that allows us to move and be very flexible. Whereas turtles, their spine and ribs are part of their shell. So they can't move as much as we do. And if you've seen Franklin or other fictional characters that come out of their shell, that's not true. Turtles can't do that in real life. They can pull themselves into their shell to help hide, but they can't pull their body out. Their tail is also attached, so we never want to pick up a turtle by its tail because that wouldn't feel good. Now, 2 turtles that we work with closely with at the zoo are the Blandings turtle and the wood turtle. The Blandings turtle, you can tell he has a beautiful yellow chin and always looks like he's smiling. The wood turtle gets its name from the patterns on its shell, which look like wood, so like rings of a tree. And with these species, so we get them when they're eggs, and they're very tiny, only about the size of a toonie. They hatch. It's very cute and never gets old. And when they come out, they look like this. So they're very small, and we raise them for 2 years in captivity. So we call this a Headstart program because we try to give them a head start in life. Let them get bigger to about the size of a medium baked potato, where they're less likely to be eaten by something when we release them back into the wild. Now, predators for turtles consist of some of these guys. So we've got birds like owls or eagles, other larger turtles like snapping turtles, mammals, so skunks, raccoons, and even humans. And when we release them, we want to release them into a habitat with clean water, lots of plants, food, and areas where they can hibernate in and lay their eggs. So the populations that we're trying to restore are in trouble, and we're trying to help them out. And we monitor them once we release them, so we can look at how they're doing and how we can better our program to help these animals. So 2 other programs that we have at Adopt a Pond that you can help with is the Frog Watch and Turtle Tally. So these are programs where any members of the public, so you, can log onto our website and tell us about a time when you saw a frog or toad or a turtle. And this is a great way for you to learn about these different animals and go out and enjoy nature. But it also gives us data that we can share with other organizations and use to help these animals. So they're 2 really great programs. Adopt a Pond also has various resources that we give out. So we have identification guides to help you learn the animals. We have curriculum resources for teachers, stewardship guides, and even signs to put up to tell people that animals cross the road. So we do all this because of the problems that these animals face. I just mentioned roads. They're a huge problem right now, in addition to habitat loss. Animals also face predators. They might be collected or hunted, which is very sad. A lot of turtles have a beautiful shell, which some people want, so they are poached. There's also pollution and then competition from species that don't naturally live in these environments. So some ways that you can help include simply putting garbage in its place and reduce, reuse, and recycle. You can also join larger cleanups. So the one shown here, Adopt a Pond hosts a Great Canadian Shoreline Cleanup every year across in the Rouge Park, and we've picked up a lot of trash. So trash is really bad for animals. They might eat a plastic bag and that gets stuck in their system. They could get injured or even die. You can see the picture of this turtle here on the screen. It got a band stuck around it when it was little, and the band never broke as the turtle grew up. So you can see that its body kind of grew around that band. So this is not a healthy situation. So it's very important to put garbage in its place. You can also keep areas natural, make your backyard a friendly place for wildlife, help plant a tree or don't destroy habitat, and just be aware of wildlife around your home. Enjoy it. You can help turtles cross the road. If you see a turtle on the side of the road and you want to help it, make sure you move it in the direction it's going. If you take it back, it's on a mission. It's going to try to cross again. Some turtles also like to lay their eggs in the gravel by the side of the road, which is a very dangerous spot for it to be since it's so close to cars. But you can also keep an eye out for the turtle crossing signs and tell your parents just to slow down if you're in the area. Remember I said that their spine is part of the shell in the body? So if you see the picture of the turtle here that was hit on the road, that was hit right over its spine and you can see the blood. That is not a good situation. There are wildlife centers around, so if you see a turtle hit, you can always just use Google and find a local wildlife center and you can take a turtle there. Just be careful if you do see a snapping turtle, because they're named snapping turtles for a reason. Their head can move almost all the way around its body. So there is a safe way to pick it up, but what I recommend is using a shovel or a blanket or something to help move it across the road. Also, don't take wild animals home. Just let them stay in their natural environment. Let them make more animals and let nature be. So these are just a few of the examples of things that you can do. If you're ever unsure of something, definitely contact someone who might know, whether, if you need to contact me at the zoo or a local conservation authority or anything. There's also lots of information out there on the internet. So I hope you enjoyed this presentation. I just want to give some thanks to people who contributed photos, and I will take any questions.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sharing that information about multiple different species of animals there. We definitely have some questions already, but keep them coming if you haven't sent in your question yet. And we'll just start by saying, you mentioned that a lot of people are maybe afraid of snakes. Rosie and Julie in grade 1 in Stouffville are apparently not afraid of frogs because they told us they're catching leopard frogs at their cottage.
Wow.
And we also have a question here from Liam, who is a grade 3 student at Beatrice Strong in Port Hope. He's wondering if snakes can swim.
Some snakes can swim. Yeah, for sure.
And what about the ones that you showed us? What about the Massasauga rattlesnake, Massasauga rattlesnake?
Yeah, so the Massasauga rattlesnake, it lives on land. And its colors, the brown and the white, really help it blend into the dirt and the leaf litter and stuff that it lives around in.
Okay. We also have a question here from Brennan in Strathroy, wondering if you pick up a turtle by its tail, could it become paralyzed?
Oh, that's a very good question. You're probably thinking about the bones and the structure of the tail. It definitely wouldn't feel good. I guess it could get injured depending on how it's being held. Whether it were to become paralyzed, that's hard to say, but it's definitely, I guess it would just depend on how it's being picked up, and that's one reason we want to avoid that.
Right. And now we have a question from Leighton at Palmer Rapids Public School, wondering what eats turtles?
Oh, lots of critters eat turtles, especially when they're babies and they're tiny. They make good, easy meals for a lot of animals. So on my slide, I had pictures of like great horned owl, eagles, skunks, raccoons, badgers, even larger turtles like snapping turtles. There's lots of critters out there that'll eat turtles, especially the babies.
Okay. And next we have a question from Sophie. Sophie would like to know what exactly turtle shells are made of. Is it bone?
So turtle shells, and I have a real one here, which I don't know how well you can see. But so again, we've got the spine inside, and the shell itself, it's kind of an extension. It's actually made out of keratin, which is the same material that your fingers are made out of. So that's kind of just grown over the body. And there's two pieces of the shell. So you've got the lower part and the upper part, which are known as the plastron and the carapace. So the two pieces which fit together. And some turtles have kind of a hinge on the shell so they can close it up. Some, like the snapping turtle, can't, and that's why it snaps. So that's the way that it deters predators.
Right. Next, we have a question from Ms. McPherson's class. Eliza wants to know if snakes hibernate.
Yes, so snakes do, especially in cold climates like here, they will hibernate. Now, some snakes, it's not a true hibernation. A true hibernation is when they fully drop their metabolism, their heart rate. Now, some snakes just become less active in cold climates. But snakes around here, they'll go into what we call a hibernaculum, which would be their place where they spend over winter. And they'll usually go with other snakes, so they get that warmth from everyone. And they could hibernate anywhere. So it could be just a pile of rubble, or even an abandoned barn or something, somewhere where that, there's still enough warmth for it. Because if it's too cold, they could freeze. So they need a perfect spot to go spend winter.
So we are back to more questions about snakes now from Ms. Mann's class at North Meadows in Strathroy. And the class would like to know what a snake would do to a swimmer in the water.
Well, snakes really just want to be left alone. So my first thought is that it'll just swim away and avoid you. You might probably scare it, like, oh, what is this big thing in the water? So.
It's funny, we always think of these animals as so scary and aggressive, but really they're most often really afraid of us. And if we leave them alone, they'd rather get away than have a...
Same as us, right? If a giant was coming at me, I'd want to run away.
Fair enough. I agree. Okay. We have another question here. Jaden in Ottawa would like to know if Blanding's turtles are poisonous.
Nope. No, none of the turtles that we have here are poisonous. Also, if you're thinking about snakes or frogs, so there are some poisonous frog species more down in like Central America, like the poison dart frog. And poison, just so you know the difference between poison and venom. So poison is on its skin. It gets absorbed if you touch it. Whereas venom, like what snakes have, it's in their bodies and they inject it into their prey. So that might also help you look at some species. But turtles, they're not dangerous.
Excellent. And now we have a question from Ms. Yunli's class, wondering what happens to frogs and turtles during the winter. We already covered snakes. What about the frogs and turtles?
Yep. So turtles and frogs and toads do hibernate. So turtles will dig down under the water or into the mud or into a burrow, and they'll hibernate. So again, they'll drop their metabolism and their heart rate. And because they go under the water, they need to still make sure that they get oxygen. So they have special skin cells under their tail that help absorb oxygen from the water. They have blood vessels in their throat that can take in oxygen, and they can also make oxygen using the sugars in their body. Frogs and toads, they'll hibernate as well, but they'll do it usually more on land because the water gets too cold and they can't get oxygen like turtles can as much. So they'll find a space that's a perfect temperature and not below the frost line, so like where they won't freeze. And you've probably seen videos of frogs that can freeze and then unthaw. So they do this because ice crystals form in their body, but they have sugars that can fight against that. So that's how they prevent themselves from not freezing. But you might find a frog in winter and you think it's dead, and as soon as it warms up, it'll be alive again.
Right. Well, we have several different classes all wondering, what is the biggest turtle in Ontario?
So the biggest turtle in Ontario is the snapping turtle. And got a picture of him right here. That guy. And they're pretty heavy. Very heavy.
So if you had to show us with your hands how big an average snapping turtle is around the shell.
So their average size is somewhere between like 20 and 36 centimeters. I think their record is like 50 centimeters. So that's like about the size, or sorry, yeah. So they're, oh gosh, no, they get big.
Is it inches or centimeters?
Oh, sorry. So that, well, actually, no, I guess that would be, sorry, the statistics are more, they measure them across the width of them. So so that's their width. Their width is like this. But yeah, if you're talking about length, kind of like that.
That's pretty big for something that will snap at you. I agree with the shovel strategy if you come across a snapping turtle. Next, we have a question from Joseph at Palmer Rapids Public School. He would like to know how long turtles can live in the wild.
Good question, and there's a variety of answers depending on the species. For example, the Blanding's turtle lives about 70, 80, but some definitely live over 100. And one of the problems with turtles, why they're in trouble, is because they can't reproduce until, for the Blandings, till they're 15 years old. So they can't have babies till that age. So they're a long-lived species, for sure.
Right. And Palmer would like to know the difference between snakes and eels.
Oh, interesting comparison. So eels live fully in the water, and eels, they're not a reptile, and they have a very, very different body shape. Well, Well, I mean, I guess similar because you're thinking, they're long and stuff. But eels, they're fully live in the water, so their body is adapted to that, and they would feel. If you think how snakes are slimy, snakes actually aren't slimy. They have scales, and people think they're slimy. Eel would definitely be slimier.
Next, we have a question from North Meadows, and they're wondering, they'd like to go over it again, what snakes and turtles eat.
What snakes and turtles eat. So snakes will eat animals like mice or rats. Again, depends on the size of the snake and then the size of the animal that it'll eat. Whereas turtles will eat a variety of foods. So they're technically omnivores, so they eat both plants and animals. So some eat fish, mollusks. Here at the zoo, we feed them lettuce, insects like earthworms and crickets. And at the zoo, we also make them special turtle gel. But in the wild, they'll eat other critters like that.
Excellent. Now we're almost out of time. I want to squeeze in a couple more questions here. Katherine, you told me one of the common questions that you were asked is what to do with a pet turtle that a family doesn't want anymore.
Yeah, so because turtles, again, they're a long-lived species, some people don't realize that when they get a pet. So it's really important if you're going to get a pet to do your research. And if you get a turtle, sometimes people have to actually write them into their will. Same with parrots too. So when people don't want turtles anymore, sometimes they release them into the wild, which you're not supposed to do. This will disrupt the natural ecosystem, and a lot of our native turtles will be outcompeted by these other ones. So there are some shelters that you can call, even like Toronto Humane Society or your local Humane Society, and there are some turtle rescues specifically that will take in turtles and try to rehome them.
Excellent. Good to know. Last question is, what other types of experts do you find yourself collaborating with as you go through these programs and maybe research? And do you have any advice for students who may want to pursue something similar?
Sure. So at Adopt a Pond, we work with a lot of different organizations. We partner with the government, and because we're right beside the Rouge Urban National Park, we work a lot with Parks Canada. We work with conservation authorities. So for us, like Toronto Region Conservation Authority, we work with government, we work with city, universities. There's a lot of people that we work with, and maintaining those partnerships is very important. But we're all working towards the common goal of conserving these turtles. So for anyone who wants to get into this field, definitely experience and education is really important. I know it's competitive, it seems, no matter what job you want to go into, everything's competitive. For me, I always wanted to work with animals, so I went to school and I studied animals. I also did all my jobs were kind of focused on animals. I worked at a vet clinic. I did a lot of volunteering. I volunteered at Toronto Wildlife Center, which again is another local rehabilitation center, and just always tried to get involved in extra things as I could and get as much skills and experience as I could. There's lots of opportunities out there for sure.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Katherine, and sharing all that information. I'm sure our students learned a lot today.
Well, thanks for having me. Those are great questions, everyone. If you need anything else, you can find us on the website, torontozoo.com/adoptapond. My email's there as well if you have any further questions.
Excellent. Well, just to let everyone know, we have some other upcoming webinars on topics like astronomy, bendable electronics, and Canadian history. More information about these and Partners in Research educational programming is available at pirweb.org. Thanks so much for joining us, and have a great day.